Well. Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another day where we're discussing games that I think are cool and want to make. Now, this one is going to be less, hey, this is my exact idea and whatnot, but this is kind of going to be talking about what makes an open world game good. Because there's a variety of things you can do with an open world game, right? You can have it be like Cyberpunk, where it is a futuristic car-based society. You can have it be like Skyrim, where it's a fantasy world where you have a horse to get around on and stuff like that. Um, it can be like Genshin Impact, for example, where you just walk around, climb stuff, yada yada. There's Breath of the Wild, all that kind of stuff. Open world games is a huge kind of thing. There's even like what's the Stalker 2 that came out recently is also an open world game. Gives you a lot of freedom to do stuff in whatever order you feel like doing it, really. But let's get to it and talk about the game. So, what is an open world game? Well, it's kind of a world where the overworld is one large continuous area. Uh, Building interiors could be instance or not part of the overworld. So, like when you go into a dungeon in Skyrim, for example, that's an instanced place, right? It's not a already loaded part that is from the overworld, right? You load into the dungeon, and when you leave the dungeon, you load into the overworld again, right? Um, but there's basically large tracts of land for you to roam around and explore. Stuff that's gonna take, so very long to explore every nook and cranny. But the key feature is you can go anywhere you want with like no linear path that you have to follow for the most part. Um, there are some that could be open world games where it's like really high difficulty level in certain areas, so you can't really go there. And some open world games might have elements that are linear paths. Dungeons, for example, are something in open world games that can be pretty linear and stuff like that, right? Um, but yeah, and as the old saying go, I don't know if this is the exact quote, but you see those mountains over there? You can climb them. That old thing from the Skyrim announcement where they were showing off the mountain, stuff like that. Anyway, let's get into it further here. And these are some game examples of what I would call open world, right? You have the Elder Scrolls series, the Fallout series. Most MMOs, I would say, like World of Warcraft, stuff like that, right? Where you can kind of do whatever you want wherever. Those are a little more linear, like I was saying, because they have that like level requirement to go to certain places. Otherwise, you're just gonna get bodied by all the enemies there. But there's the Genshin Impact and all the games that are related to Genshin Impact. There's Minecraft, is a nice open world one. Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 are for the most part. There's Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Elden Ring is also an example of one, and Project Zomboid, which we've played on this channel before. All open world games that let you do whatever you want, pretty much, whenever you want to do it, with story elements and stuff sprinkled in around here, right? On to the next one. So, when we're making an open world game, we got to ask ourselves, what is in our world, right? We need to know, what's going to be inside of it so we can populate it. So it kind of depends upon the world setting, right? Fantasy, you're going to have monsters or like wild animals. You're going to have small towns and villages, etc., right? Apocalypse, you're going to have whatever, mutants or scavengers looting ruins to do crazy stuff like that. Sci-fi, you're going to have any mix of robots, spaceships, different planets, different space stations, maybe even just a futuristic single planet thing like cyberpunk, kind of stuff like that. Sci-fi uses a lot of technology in its building here. But basically, you just want to think about what's going to be in your world and add it in. Make the world seem alive, right? So we want to talk about using all of your space now, because this is one thing that is very important, just very important in an open world game, because nobody likes to run across 5 minutes of empty field with nothing in it. Also, I made a typo here. That should say walking 5+ minutes across an empty field. But I'm sure we've all played those games that are open world, and we've been just walking, just walking. No enemies around, nothing to loot, no interesting landmarks or anything like that. It's just boring, right? So the thing is to make your landscapes interesting, you know? Have them be interesting things like walls or signposts, trees, just something to break up there being nothing. Whether it's a signpost telling you that, oh, hey, this is how you get to your location. It could be simple things like enemies being here and there for the player to attack, gatherable things like herbs or like scraps and stuff like that can respawn. Um, Traveling NPCs, I think, are very handy to have because it makes the world feel alive. Like you're not the only person who's wandering around. So we're talking like I know Fallout 4 has caravans that go around and you can meet them. Skyrim has those armed patrols and prisoner transport stuffs like that, right? So give them happening, and then random events that occur sometimes in areas of lower activity is also something that I think is very important to have, and we'll get into that here in a moment. So next we want to talk about why would I go back, right? So think about your world. Think about everything there. Now this area here, why would I go back there after I've been here once, right? So you climbed a mountain and got a collectible that only spawns once. Will you ever climb that mountain again? Now this is one thing that I have a... If you think about Genshin Impact, for example, how they have those collectibles that you can go around and collect that are just like a one-time thing that occur there. Like you have to climb up really tall mountains to get this specific item and whatnot, and then it's never there again. Why would you ever climb the mountain again, right? And I feel like in Genshin Impact, and I don't remember their name, is it Hoyo or whatever the heck it is, who makes them? A lot of their games are like this. They have these huge expansive worlds, but then most of the areas you're only going to go to like once ever. That cliff over there that has like a scenic view, only time you're going to go there. Stuff like that. There's no reason for you to really go back to these locations, and that's kind of a waste, because why make it if you are not going to have people go back, right? So like the corner of the map that's out of the way that once explored, is there any reason to go there? Like I said, another good example is Skyrim. The place where you first start out in Helgen, for anything after the main quest there. Do you ever go back? What about those frozen glaciers in the northeast? Have you ever just wandered back up there for no reason after you've completed the quests up there? No, none of us have. There's no reason to do so, right? But once you complete everything in that location, there's just no reason to go back, right? I mean, sure, you could go to gather the herbs that respawn there or something like that, but you can get those elsewhere. You can get them from a shop, stuff like that. But yeah, so very rarely do I find myself going back to places I've already explored, unless there's like a quest or like a vendor or something else that happens in that location, right? And that's, well, just kind of sad. So how do we get people to return to those places? This is a important question. Because at some point, you're gonna basically run out of things to have people return to, right? So I would suggest you can have random events that only happen in that place. That mountain you climbed for a collectible, maybe an NPC spawns up there with some unique interactions. Maybe he's a mountain climber and he tells you some lore about the world after you find him, but he only spawns on certain days in certain weather conditions, stuff like that. So you're always wanting to, check around the map because you never know who's going to show up where, right? Maybe it's a corner of the map. Maybe there's some warring factions that are fighting there sometimes. That's one thing, for example, with Skyrim that I felt like they didn't really do much of. There's a war going on between the Stormcloaks and the Imperials, and there's just no battles going on. The place doesn't even look like there's been a battlefield at all. Um, there's been a war going on. There's a severe lack of like fortifications in the middle of nowhere, and like destroyed ground and bushes and stuff like that, right? Um, so what you could do is just have constant like NPCs fighting in an area, and you could go up there and help kill a bunch of them and leave, and then maybe they respawn again or something like that. Who knows? Um, yeah, like maybe on certain days or nights, a crazy magic phenomenon happens here or something. One thing that I've always remembered about my time playing World of Warcraft is there was this like magical little grove that was in like this weird spot away from like everything. Absolutely no reason to go there. Um, but at like a specific time of day, I think it was nighttime or something. Otherwise, it just looked like a circle of like plants and stuff. But at certain times of the day, you would go there and there'd be like this interesting stuff happening there. I forget exactly what it was. I think they were like wisps or fairies or something that was there that was happening that was interesting. And that was one of the coolest things I've seen in WoW, right? Um, you could limit resources to only spawn in that specific location. Like for Skyrim, for example, with the glacier area, maybe there's like frost berries or something that only spawn in glacier areas. You know, something like that. For indoor locations like caves, so you go into a cave, you clear out all the enemies or the bandits or whatever, and then it's just empty. Or what they do is after a certain amount of time, just the same enemies move back in. But what if you clear out a den of wolves, and then perhaps bandits move in a while later in order to take it over and make it their hideout, since it's a new place. And then what if you kill the bandits, and then some necromancers move in because they have the corpses of the bandits to use to resummon them and stuff like that, right? And then it just kind of goes over this course, right? You kill the necromancers, and then monsters come in because the monsters are going to feed off of the bones and stuff left behind by the skeletons and necromancer meat, stuff like that. And then you kill out the monsters, and the bandits move back in. Just kind of a cycle to keep things fresh and interesting. I think it's important to have all that. But another thing that you don't want to do is make things too cluttered, and that's very important as well. Because as much as you don't want to understimulate the viewer or not the viewer, the player, and have them walk across a field for 5 minutes and not encounter anything of interest, you also don't want to have them be constantly bombarded by everything going on, right? Like a lot of people would get distracted. I would get distracted a lot. The old like the memes and sayings about Skyrim has a main quest, Mark, because there's just so much stuff you're getting distracted by, or all the memes that are like, please just finish the main quest, and it's like, I can't, I have to get these flowers for such and such, right? And it's like just an unimportant little thing. People like to get distracted, right? But the thing is, if they're getting distracted like every step of their journey, it's gonna be more aggravating than not, right? So if you're constantly getting a new quest every like 5 feet down the road or something, or if you're constantly getting jumped by high level enemies in a dangerous place, you're not going to have time to recover, and especially not being able to get to a vendor from where you're at is also something not very good. So yeah, like limit an event that happens to one event per loaded area at once. So if you have, let's say, a city, okay, so one random event could occur in the city at one time whenever you're there, right? If you're up in Skyrim Glaciers, that whole area, only one random event can be happening in that area. And then if you leave and come back, the event could change to a different one. You never know, whatever. But this not only prevents the player from being overstimulated by everything going on, but it allows you to stretch out the content, right? So you don't want to go somewhere and oops, all like 20 events that we had randomly planned for this area happened all at once. That's just going to mean that all that stuff gets used up at one time. Not ideal. You want to have them go over a certain amount of time, so the player's always like, I wonder if anything else is going to be at this location. Well, this stuff that happened here was really interesting, but something else will happen if I go back, right? And that's what you want them to think about. So now we want to talk about how to get players to move around your map. I'm going to take a drink, so give me one moment. So there's a couple ways you can do this, right? How to get them to actually move around your map and do things rather than staying in the same place the whole time. Um, Having equipment durability and repairs is one thing because, guns, armor, swords, whatever, they should break down and become unusable after a time. But unlike in the Legend of Zelda games, they shouldn't be destroyed forever and become completely useless. You should be able to go to town and have your equipment repaired or buy items to repair your own equipment. Um, think Morrowind's like repair hammers, and there was actually like an armorer skill that they had to allow you to repair your own armor. So you would go and get repair hammers, take them on your journey. It would use up some of your carrying capacity, but you'd be able to repair your own stuff every so often as you needed it. And if you were out, then you couldn't. And that's really great. There's also ammos and healing items, such as ammo for guns or arrows for bows. But you want to limit what can be found outside cities, but you have to return to the city to get more, right? Healing items, similarly, don't necessarily let your health regenerate fully by time alone. Make them use like bandages and potions. Like Morrowind, for example, does not have a mana regen at all. So you either have to sleep or buy mana potions and use them that way. You can't just wait and regenerate your mana. It only regenerates via those methods. So it like limits what you can do, the repertoire you have on hand for a specific thing. So if you run out of mana potions and you're a spellcaster, well, your journey gets interrupted and you got to go back to town or somewhere else in order to find more potions, right? You could make the character require food, water, and sleep. That way, things can only be frequently found in towns that you can go to get in town, right? You want to limit the carrying capacity so they can only loot so much, so they have to go back to town and again sell stuff or whatnot. And you should, create events. And this one is quite unique. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do anything like this in a open world game, but create events that cause disasters. Think like floods that you can't cross, or trees falling across paths so that the player has to go a different way. And I know a tree falling across a path doesn't seem like much, but if it's like a redwood tree, for example, falling across a path, you wouldn't be able to climb over it, and going around it would take you, maybe 100 feet or 50 meters or however the conversion works around to one side. And maybe because you've only followed the path before, going around that way leads you to something else that you've never seen before on the map, right? I know some of you might be like, but if you're just making the character go to the, town all the time in order to get, repairs and stuff, isn't that just having them go to the same place over and over again? And sure, it could be, but for example, if your character is roaming around and exploring and they're not like doing a quest or anything like that, they could maybe be going north from town for a while, and then they're going east to town, from town, right? And then they're just in a random part of the map, and maybe the quickest way back for them is not the way they came, but a new route directly to town, right? So they'll wander around on whatever path they take, and then when they're low on items, they'll just beeline straight to town, which takes them through new content, right? Does that make sense? Unless, of course, you have fast travel, which limit fast travel. So on the right here, we have a picture of Morrowind's fast travel network. Now, in Morrowind, unlike the more recent additions to the Elder Scrolls series, you can't fast travel everywhere. Fast travel is limited to towns and other specific areas. And as you can see, this is the map. Everything that is like named is a location that you can fast travel to or from. But, for example, if we look at a Garmok here on the left, in the middle kind of thing here, right where my mouse is at, you can't take a boat from here all the way to Sadrith Mora in one go. No. You would have to go from Garmok to Kull, over to Dagon Fell, and then you could go to Sadrith Mora, right? So you have to have some intermediaries in order to get there. There's also, the Mages Guild in the Mage Cities. You can teleport between the Mages Guilds. There's the Silt Striders, which are kind of like land-based. If you think Skyrim, it'd be like carriages, essentially, right? To go between the landlocked cities, but all the cities around, the outside, they all have boats and stuff. And then there's also the mysterious Dunmer fortresses that are the green ones, where you can travel between them, or if you have the DLC, you can go to Caldera, to the Mages Guild, talk to the guy, and he can teleport you to whichever one you want, and then from every one, you can teleport back to him. So it creates this like sort of network of the different places that you can go to here. So let's say we're in Sadrith Mora and we want to get to Margon. Well, the fastest route would be to go from Sadrith Mora's Mages Guild to Aldaroon Mages Guild, and then to Margon via Siltstrider, right? So we don't want to spoil the player by making them able to fast travel to every single location that they've been to, right? So we want to have them walk to dungeons and other locations. Like this whole area here is like inaccessible unless you walk. Like most of the map is inaccessible if you don't walk. But what doing this does is it allows the player from whatever location they're at to wander around and explore your map, which is very important. Because if let's say I am from Morgahan right here, right? And I have explored up around here in this area, or Mogulmar, sorry, here. I've explored this area, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna go back to Sadrith Mora for a while, do some quests here. Then I have a quest over like right here, right? Well, if fast travel is enabled, rather than like if you can fast travel to dungeons and everything, rather than taking a new route that you've never explored before, you would just teleport to the closest dungeon location and then walk there, right? And you would just walk from there. So you would just go like that little distance, right? But if you were at Sadrith Mora and you couldn't fast travel immediately, and the closest place would have been Sadrith Mora itself, you would, go across the islands, go explore down here, and have a brand new path that you had never searched through before, right? It kind of leads you to do all this different stuff. It's great. And I think this is pretty much peak travel systems, right? Like fast traveling everywhere is so overused, and I think it sucks, right? Because it really limits how much of the world your character, experiences. And on the note of fast travel, I think it's also important to maybe not handhold the player as much. And when they have quests, don't give them waypoints that tell them exactly where it's at. Morrowind does it nice, where you have a journal that you can look through. You can look at your quests, and they tell you information about this NPC is in this location in this city, or this dungeon is to the east of this town, but south of this location. So you kind of have to use the journal to navigate, and you're never 100% sure where you're going unless it is a capital city or like a major city, because those are all like marked, right? If I want to get here to a random dungeon in the middle of nowhere, well, you better tell me that it is kind of, southwest of Voss, and it's south of a dungeon that's right here. So if you go east of Voss, find that dungeon, you can then go south. It helps the player to like navigate better, right? That's what I feel is because if they have a waypoint, they're just going to follow it directly. They're just going to go point A to point B, just straight ahead. They're not going to wander around at all and see like, oh, hey, there's an interesting place over here that I've never explored. And yeah, it's kind of a waste, I feel. So in conclusion, you want to give the player freedom, but not too much, right? They should be able to do what they want, when they want, but not to the point that it allows them to skip out on content, right? We want to create things in such a way that makes the player need to travel around the map a lot, whether it's, limiting their fast travel ability, whether it's needing them to go to town frequently in order to get supplies, or whatever you can come up with. And you want to use all the space you can get, but not all at once, right? You want to have various things going on, but not to the extent that it gets overwhelming. So that's kind of the long and short of it. Now, like I said, this isn't one of the videos where I'm like, this is what I would do if I was like making an MMO and the exact MMO that I would make. This one was more of like an overview of how I think MMOs should be, not MMOs, how I think open world games should be. If I were to ever create one, I would try to do it along this, right? Because I feel like I could just talk about making an RPG, and I'd probably make an open world RPG, right? But I wanted to get this out there so that if anyone is thinking about making an open world game, they could potentially think about using any of these ideas here. I especially want to say that Morrowind is peak RPG and open world design, okay? Because it's great. I've had a brilliant time replaying it recently, and I think it's very, very important that we learn from the beauty that is this fast travel map, right? Being able to, go from point A to point B ain't so easy when you have to navigate through various things, right? And it kind of forces you to go to like new cities that you've never visited before. Like I said, if you're trying to go from like Balmora to Margon, you would have to go through Alderune first, and then you get to experience the city of Alderune and witness the beauty of that city, and maybe encounter something interesting there before you go directly to the next one. It's always about wanting to move the character along, but showing them what you want them to see, as opposed to them being able to choose what they see, right? Which seems like counterproductive when you're trying to make it like an open world game where you can do whatever you want, right? But you kind of want to guide the player, have a curated experience, while also giving them the freedom to do whatever they want, right? I mean, you're not telling them that they have to take the Silt Strider to, get from Alderune to Margon. It's the fastest way, but they could walk, right? Stuff like that. So I think that's what's really important, in an open world game, limiting fast travel, allowing you to, always have like a new experience when you're going somewhere, even if you've already visited it, right? And that's very important. So I want to touch a little more on that subject, though. So let's take the island up here, the island chain up here, I should say. Let's say you explore it once, it's whatever. Right around here-ish, there's a Daedric shrine where some some stupid orcs are like worshipping Malakath, I think, what's happening there. Obviously, the first time you go there, you're going to kill the orcs because they're hostile and wander off, right? But what if the next time you go by there, there's, like a Daedra who is getting summoned by a bunch of weird cloaked figures, using the orc remains as sacrifices or something, right? I mean, that would be an interesting little, ooh, this didn't happen last time I was here kind of thing, right? And that's what you want to bring to the game, I think. I think adding those things in and being like, hey players, so this game has a lot of random events that happen randomly in various locations. So even if you've gone somewhere one time and seen a random event, there could be multiple different events that could occur in the same location, right? And that's all you give them. You don't tell them what the events are, where they're at, how to trigger them. You just let them figure it out. That's one of the fun things about older games. When you were playing them, when I was playing them when I was younger, is you had to figure stuff out yourself, right? There weren't all these guides or hand-holding stuff online, which you needed to figure something out. You just searched for it, right? And then you would go to school the next day and be like, oh my God, y'all, I found this crazy thing at this location. And, people would go about doing it. And I think having those random encounters is something cool that you could do, because then people could go on to like Reddit or whatever and be like, yo guys, has anyone else seen this crazy event that happened here? And people will be like, what? No way. How did you get that? That's crazy. I want to see that for myself. And then they'll constantly go to that place and not see it, but then they'll be going back. It'll encourage people to share their experiences with others, who will then be like, I want to experience that too. And then they'll go there and know in the back of their mind that they should keep going to that location, see that event. But here's the fun part. Because it's one of many events, they'll not only be waiting for that one, but during the process of trying to see that event, they'll see other events and report into other people that, oh my god, I saw this event while looking for this event. And it'll be beautiful, right? So anyway, that's all from me, everyone. I hope y'all had some fun listening to me talk about these open world games, stuff like that. But yeah, until next time, I'll catch you all later. Bye-bye.